Welcome back, everyone. I'm Asa Hyken, and I'm now joined by Cameron Curtis, EVP of Worldwide Digital Marketing for Warner Bros. Pictures. We're going to be chatting about Warner Bros. Beetlejuice experience in Roblox, integrating physical commerce into virtual activations, and more. Welcome, Cameron.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So before we dive in,
with me.
Oh yes, exactly. Love those guys. So before we dive into questions and really breaking down this experience, I know that you have a trailer for the Roblox world you'd like to share, as well as a few slides. Want to kick those things off?
Yeah, absolutely. First, just to introduce myself, my name's Cameron Curtis. I oversee the digital marketing team at Warner Brothers, specific to theatrical marketing. So we're essentially responsible for driving urgency and getting people to leave their homes, buy a ticket, and go to the movie theater to experience our movies. I'm really excited to talk about the work that we did on Beetlejuice specifically today, and the work that we did to engage Gen Z and to reach new audiences, and a lot of that involved our partnership with Roblox and Fandango. And so, before we dive into all the specifics, take a look at this 1-minute teaser to give you a sense of what the integration looked like.
Beetlejuice is coming to Roblox. Play now and get your tickets to Beetlejuice in theaters September 6th.
Be warned, it's intense.
Don't ever say that name. Not ever.
If you say his name 3 times, he will appear.
Beetlejuice.
I need you to help me save my daughter.
Get your tickets now for Beetlejuice. In theater September 6th.
Nice. Yeah. So Cameron, you want to present some of those slides on what the experience was and sort of what it achieved?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go through it. There we go. There it is. So yeah, we're really excited about this opportunity. It was a first to market version. I think, Asa, we have the wrong deck up, and I think there's a link that I want to be sure that you have pulled before we dive into it.
Okay.
Let me share this.
Cool.
Sorry about that.
All good. Okay. So we're going to be getting this one squared away. I guess
I can talk about it a little bit. As we go into it, I'll talk about it a little bit if we could pull that deck up. But, essentially, we were marketing the sequel to Beetlejuice, and, we had an opportunity as we were thinking about our objectives in marketing the movie. There was a entire audience that had never potentially seen the original or that hadn't been born yet when the first one was in theaters. And so as we thought about that Gen Z audience, we thought about where are they today, and where can we go where our audience is. And a big portion of that audience spends a lot of their time on Roblox. And so, as we were thinking about the campaign objectives, and if we go into the next slide here, we were thinking about, okay, what are some strategic pillars that we want to bring forward in marketing this campaign? We wanted a potent mix of nostalgic and new. So this idea that we wanted to be true to the first movie, but also introduce new elements from this movie. We're extremely lucky that we had Tim Burton back directing this movie, and that we had Jenna Ortega cast in this role. Jenna has obviously been extremely successful in her Wednesday series on Netflix. And what was great is, if you think about Wednesday and the series that plays on Netflix, Beetlejuice is very much somewhat of a sister type title to the Wednesday of it all. And so their audiences were able to make that connection with Jenna's character in the movie. And Jenna had obviously had a huge moment on TikTok that we wanted to play up as well from Wednesday and all the work she did on Netflix. We also, we had Tim Burton, who if Tim Burton, I like to think about if Tim Burton was coming up in his film career today, he would be a creator on TikTok. He would be somebody that would be building and creating worlds within a platform like Roblox. And so we knew that, because his work is so iconic, the visual storytelling that he does is so identifiable, that when it came to, building an afterlife experience specific to Beetlejuice, we realized like, wow, like with a virtual world, we can bring folks into this Tim Burton environment, which we saw as a great opportunity. The iconic characters and cast, I talked about, some of the amazing cast. Michael Keaton returned as Beetlejuice. This was an amazing opportunity for us to connect to those who were fans of the original. Again, that through line is something that you're really fortunate with what we had with this storytelling. And then we wanted to make sure that everything we did was unmistakably and undeniably Beetlejuice. And, Beetlejuice is a disruptor. So the way that he shows up in the movie disrupts. And, being in digital marketing, there's no, we're always thinking about disrupting, whether it's the social feeds or working with influencers and creators in new ways, or coming up with partnerships that have never been done before. We wanted to make sure that everything we were doing on this campaign was unmistakably and undeniably Beetlejuice. So some of the thematic hooks that, as we were building around that, welcome to the afterlife. The afterlife is a world of its own, and one that's very identifiable. As we get into it, and as you saw in that trailer, this is an experience that folks want to explore. And what made Roblox perfect for that is users and audiences, as they play on Roblox, are used to creating and exploring in these worlds, and the afterlife was a unique environment for them to do that in. We also had this thematic hook of embracing your weird. So this idea that the quirky, unmistakable elements that make up Beetlejuice, we wanted audiences to embrace their quirkiness within this virtual environment. And so we offered avatars and UGC items for people to discover that became a lot of fun and gamified the entire thing. Family to the end and beyond, as we get into this experience, what was really great, and as you think about working with Roblox, is that you don't want to just build and develop these experiences so that they exist in a vacuum. You have to engage creators on platform. You have to think about connection points that drive people into the game. Those are crucial in getting the correct, traffic to the experience. And so something that would happen would be we partnered with the top 4 games on the platform, and as users met their demise potentially in a game, in a popular game, they were taken to a portal and introduced to the afterlife and introduced to the character of Beetlejuice. So that was, a really, important thing for us. And then as we think about, teen angst with a twist, I think what's so cool about Jenna's character in the movie is that this is a very relatable character. Somebody, as we think about the Gen Z audience on social, on TikTok, on Roblox, I think Jenna was very relatable in this role and made it very approachable and made people want to learn more about the story. And then again, back to disruption, this idea that if you say Beetlejuice 3 times, something happens. Our title is Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. We wanted to enable the opportunity for audiences to say it out loud and then have something happen, disrupt the experience in some way. So if we hop over to the next slide. This again is a preview of some of the things you saw in the trailer, but what was the most important element of this is today, when so many people, have such a great setup at home and you can watch and stream so much of your content at home, we had to underline that this was an experience to be had in movie theaters. And in my mind, there's no better place to experience stories and movies than in the movie theater. And so a partnership with Fandango, this was the first time that Roblox had ever done a partnership with Fandango. We thought about, extending the virtual environment to the physical and real environments. And that came through ticketing. And so, when you were in this experience of Beetlejuice, you had the opportunity to buy tickets to the movie. And this was something that we were really proud of and excited to work on with both Roblox and Fandango. And again, for us, underline that this was a movie and experience to be had in theaters. Some of the things we saw, in addition to the portals that I mentioned across all the games, we had a pretty solid media presence across the platform. So we had the Afterlife Hub, which was our main experience, where you could engage with the characters from the movie and see, different environments within the movie and collect objects from the movie. We also had in-game placements and advertisements throughout the Roblox platform, pointing to the experience that garnered us around 30 million impressions, highlighting the trailer. We had a GameStop gift card program that was branded Beetlejuice. That was pretty special. That was also driving traffic to the game. And then we also did a homepage takeover in the United States, time to launch, which again just really eventized the launch and eventized that moment for us. This was, something I was really excited about, was that, Roblox allowed us to introduce Beetlejuice Beetlejuice to audiences, that Gen Z audience that I mentioned was so critical. 75% of the audience that played our game was under 25. So we had those under 25-year-olds creating UGC content. I think something that's so powerful about these virtual environments is that when audiences go into them, typically they tend to or can record their experience and then share them outside of the platform to TikTok, to YouTube, to all these destinations. So suddenly the reach extends well beyond, just the game itself. And that's something that's critical. So we saw an over 90 million social reach. It was the most viewed theatrical experience of all time that has been done with Roblox. And that's something that we're extremely proud to talk about. We've been working with Roblox since 2018 on the first Aquaman. And so this experience, we kind of challenged ourselves to level up and to see how we can increase engagement. How can we increase traffic? How can we increase time spent? All of those were important elements that we were thinking about. And then with that additional ticketing layer, a lot of firsts here that we were really proud of. And then it drove an average of 7 minutes of gameplay per user. So I think for all of us as digital marketers, that is probably the most valuable metric that you can ask for. We had the undivided attention of audiences under 25 for a solid 7 minutes, whereas normally we're lucky if we get them for a few seconds to get our theatrical messaging across. And again, that's I think a big component and big value add when it comes to building these virtual worlds, is that you are totally immersing audiences into the world of the movie and getting them excited about it, getting them to know these characters that they may not have known from the first, and ultimately underlining again that this is a movie to be seen in theaters. Some of the other things, I mentioned some of the first to market tech, but we added some voice technology to this. So if you turned on your microphone and you were within the game and you said Beetlejuice 3 times, he would appear. We also challenged users to say that throughout the gameplay. And then, we had, the crazy stat of over, 856,000 hours of gameplay compared to, past experiences we had done where we may have, saw very high levels of gameplay, but not to this level. And I think part of that is developing a game that's fun, that's actually challenging. It wasn't just an advertisement. Again, you could collect objects. There were new elements to it. And I think that's such an important thing to this, is not just dropping an ad within a game, but making it something that's valuable and fun to be a part of. This I got into a little bit earlier as it related to the 4 top games, but we wanted to extend again beyond the Afterlife, and we had portals that drove users to the Afterlife experience that we had built. There were over 100,000 UGC items that were scattered out and collected from all of these worlds that were Beetlejuice specific. And that was a pretty powerful thing. We also saw that, because of all of these experiences combined, having our trailer in the gameplay and across these games, we garnered an additional 149 million views on our trailer. And if you think about it as a movie marketer, the movie trailer is the most valuable asset we have to sell the movie. And if we can get somebody typically to watch the entire trailer, we are that much closer to converting them to buy a ticket. And so in this case, again, with a majority of our audiences under 25 and a majority of our audiences spending over 7 minutes in gameplay, the idea that they're also encountering our trailer and getting a sense of the movie, that's a really important thing. This was the Fandango of it all. So the tested commerce. So, we had a lot of learnings from this. And, essentially you can utilize Robux in game as a virtual currency. In this instance, we partnered with Fandango and we built a hub that then drove you outside of the experience to actually purchase the tickets. But a ton of, opportunity there and a ton of learnings that came from it. And again, for us, just underlining the theatrical nature of this was a priority. And so that Fandango tie-in was extremely valuable. I think some of the learnings that we also saw is after this launched, we pay close attention to NRG tracking, which exists under Nielsen. And, we saw with all of the marketing activity we were doing, we saw a 30-point lift in awareness among, time to the launch of the Beetlejuice Afterlife experience. We saw an 11-point lift in theatrical intent. So that's the urgency that I was describing and how important it is in my job to work to create that urgency. Because if you think about it, again, you're comfortable at home. We're thinking about, how do we get people to get off of their couch to go to the theater and buy a ticket? And when you see those levels rise, you feel pretty confident in that the work you're doing is driving, that urgency. And throughout, we were just driving incentives within the game to increase engagement and UGC content. So, we were encouraging influencers, creators, audiences to share and discover across the game as we got into it. Here are some of just the fun items I wanted to highlight. Like, I think it's pretty important that, as you think about integrating in these virtual worlds, that you show up and you're authentic to your movie. All of these are pretty accurate to the movie itself. And, especially to, again, the quirkiness and the one and only Tim Burton, all this is identifiably very Tim Burton-esque. And that was intentional. So we had, the Beetlejuice iconic avatar gear that you could wear and place on your avatars. We had the Beetlejuice sandworm that was so iconic in our trailers and movies, the sign, the wigs, everything, the costumes of the characters. All of these things were collectible. And then suddenly what we've done is we've created a Roblox world where you have audiences running around in what kind of become advertisements for the movie itself, which is pretty exciting. So this is just, some of the user-generated content that I was talking about earlier, but we saw over 100 YouTube videos that, generate over 90 million views. And, this is, again, all earned media. One of the things that I appreciate that we've done within the marketing group at Warner Brothers is we've divided our group into paid and earned. And my group specifically is focused on all of the earned opportunities that we have. And social is a huge component of that. We often work closely with our publicity and partnerships teams to think about the earned media that can come from leveraging our IP. In this case, inspiring folks to create videos around our activations, that's money can't buy heat. We often measure social volume as we approach release, and to see those social volume spikes happen outside of when we're launching trailers, that's a very critical part of what we're focused on. And we certainly saw that working here with Roblox. And I think that's one of the beauty of these virtual experiences and partnering with Roblox is that is the exploration that happens on platform, the passion that the audiences feel about capturing their experience within these virtual environments. That's money can't buy heat and signals a lot of excitement when they're capturing experiences that are promoting your film. One of the things that we loved about partnering with Roblox, and I think for everyone out there thinking about creating a virtual world or partnering with them, is that they have a tremendous social footprint, and we worked with them on the promotion around this experience and made sure that both the Warner Brothers social channels, the Beetlejuice social channels, and then our talent social channels were collabing with and promoting this experience in game. And again, you know, our priority is always to sell tickets to movies and to get people out to the movie theater. This experience was a conduit to that. So where we normally maybe wouldn't take as much time to drive folks to a one-off game, this one-off game also had ticketing built in. So it made a lot of sense for us to do it. And you know, again, with the knowledge that as you play the game, you'd be meeting our characters and kind of living within a virtual trailer, that was a pretty important priority for us. I think what's fun is when you see Beetlejuice content show up in Dress to Impress videos, which, you know, received hundreds and thousands of views. This is, you know, going back to the point of having, you know, content that is unique to your movie, authentic to your movie, but uniquely also Roblox. And so, you know, it was really exciting to see when users were showcasing their avatars in UGC content and propping them up against other items that they had collected in game. Just what a cool thing when it comes to social content and the generation of that social content to see Beetlejuice branded assets out there in the world. So in summary, and I know I kind of rushed through it and I look forward to talking more about it, is compelling IP and gameplay. It's critical that you're not just dropping an ad in Roblox, but that you're building a game worthy of its audience. And we did just that. We partnered with Sawhorse as the agency and production agency specifically that worked with us on building this experience. Sawhorse is a preferred developer on Roblox, and Roblox has a list of preferred developers. So if anyone is ever looking to work with them specifically, I highly recommend working with their preferred developers who have the experience, who know the world, who can bring brands in and making sure that they show up authentically. Sawhorse was a great partner on this. We also had, you know, fun and creative integrations within the top games. So it's not just enough to build a one-off experience. You want to be sure that you're showing up in some of the top games on the platform and that traffic is being driven to your experience. And then make sure you have those highly coveted UGC rewards. So make sure you have those collectibles scattered throughout the game, because those collectibles lead to social conversation, lead to content generation, and are just crucial to promotional experiences like these. That's kind of sums up, you know, again, our work with Roblox, and it was a really great one. I should also say talent came to play. So you saw at the beginning of that trailer, I showed at the beginning of this presentation, Jenna Ortega was game to promote and call out Roblox and work with us on it. We also, you know, had a huge partnership with TikTok, and everything that we were doing to reach Gen Z and in Roblox was showcased on TikTok. And those are important places to be when you're looking to promote and open a movie to as broad an audience as possible. I think too, you know, my last takeaway is that wherever we can make audiences the co-pilots of our marketing campaigns and not the passengers, that's when you win. You know, when you bring them into the creation, when you make them marketers alongside of you, we see that much more engagement. And that was certainly an objective here, and one that we achieved.
Awesome, Cameron. Thank you so much for that presentation. There's a lot to unpack about this experience, and I realize that we only have 17 minutes, so let's get into it. You know, I want to start with the idea of building brand assets in a virtual space. I think this is a daunting task for a lot of brands. You know, they want that fidelity. They don't want to turn off users in a virtual world with items that don't represent the real items, don't represent their brand. And so I'm curious, you know, what was the process like for Warner Bros. To recreate its brand assets in this experience? Was there a back and forth between Warner Bros. And Sawhorse or Roblox? Like, this character representation is good, but not good enough, or the setting needs more of this and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think you want to find kind of a sweet spot where The experience is fresh and exciting, without kind of overstaying its welcome. And I think a lot of what we did was a lot of back and forth with filmmakers. It was a lot of back and forth with Sawhorse, who was the developer. And it was a lot of back and forth with Roblox and Fandango. I think we wanted to be true to the brand, which was Beetlejuice. But we also wanted to be unique to Roblox, and so authentic to Beetlejuice and unique to Roblox was a priority for us. And Sawhorse was a great developer and partner in that way. They have a lot of experience developing a lot of these games, and I cannot say enough how important it is to partner with somebody on anything that anyone is doing that has experience building these virtual worlds and understands what will be the most collected items in game. How do you create the most conversation coming off of that? And I think what's also so incredible is, again, because we were working with Tim Burton, and you're talking about Beetlejuice, the creative and the look of the world is so unique that it's unmissable. And without dropping a ton of in theater type messaging or branding or ticketing messaging in game, we built the world of the afterlife, and we positioned these characters around the game, and you quickly understood who Beetlejuice was and what this was all about. And to me, that's a credit to the filmmaker and certainly his talents in creating, movies that are so unique and identifiable that you want that to then exist in the virtual world as well.
So what I found to be one of, if not the most interesting part of this world, is that real world tie-in with Fandango. Starting to see this a little bit more on Roblox and other platforms, and we can harp on the phygital word, but this is a little bit more than that. It's not so much having one thing kind of in the digital, one foot in the digital world, one foot in the physical world, but this is actually driving real sales. This is akin to real world commerce. So how did Warner Bros. Decide to tie this real world commerce component in?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it was probably one of the most innovative, parts of the campaign. And I think we wanted to test if we could bridge the gap between virtual and physical engagement, and essentially taking, someone who's immersed in the quirky afterlife world and then prompting them to take an action in the real world. And I think that's the opportunity for brands here. Collaborating again with Fandango, we build a virtual box office where users could purchase tickets outside of the experience. And that's honestly where I think brands will get the most value out of these virtual experiences, is when you can start to create that connection point. A lot of learnings for us there, as it relates to driving folks outside of platform to then purchase tickets, and a lot of considerations that went into doing that. And I think it's something we're going to continue to build upon and utilize as we go. But it is, for us, and my objective as a digital marketer, a theatrical digital marketer, is to get folks at the end of the day always to buy a ticket and to see a movie in theaters. And so that's pretty unique when you think about, some of our competitors at Netflix or Amazon who have the goal of getting people to stream content. My goal is to get folks to buy tickets. And so everything that I do, I want there to be some type of ticketing component, and I want to think about new ways to push ticketing and to have audiences, celebrate that theatrical experience. So that was really the connection point, is starting there and knowing how critical that is to get people into the theaters. Then it was just about, how do we build this so it's all connected?
So I'm curious, did Warner Bros. Have to navigate any currency exchange issues? You mentioned Robux being the official tender of Roblox, but of course you can't use Robux in the real world. How did you all deal with that?
Yeah, we kept it separate here. So, in this instance, you were driven off of platform to purchase on Fandango. So we built the kiosk that was Fandango in the virtual world, and then you were directed to Fandango itself to buy the ticket. I'm hoping in the future there's opportunities to leverage Robux. I think that's a great one, and certainly, is the currency, to your point, that they use in game. that currency is specific to buying virtual items today and not physical items. And hopefully, one day we kind of also bridge that gap in partnering with Roblox and utilizing Robux. But in this instance, there wasn't any conversion that had to be done. We were sending folks to Fandango to buy tickets.
And another question here about the development of this world. You also talked about the voice activation that you will use, say Beetlejuice 3 times. What was implementing that like? That too feels like something that is a pretty new addition to these virtual ecosystems, and the fact that the game can recognize these words, that seems like, oh, there's a lot of potential there. So tell me a little bit about bringing that technology into this experience.
Yeah, it was very specific too. I think we're fortunate in that the tie-in made so much sense. Obviously, the movie and the title of our movie is all about not saying his name 3 times or else he appears. And so there were other partnerships we had, whether it was via, Amazon on Alexa or, other opportunities where you could say his name 3 times and something would happen. We wanted this to become part of that. And I think it's Easter eggs like that keep audiences coming back. So it's not something that we promoted initially on launch. We let it be a discoverable. And I think for all of us, having as many discoverable Easter eggs within these games is extremely important. And, saying Beetlejuice 3 times was one of those. And it was fun to watch folks discovering that aspect of it. And it was specific, again, to the afterlife that we had built, where you said his name 3 times, items would unlock. And a pretty cool thing that was very specific to Beetlejuice, 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 and not any other sayings, but something that we saw a lot of success with and generated even more UGC content once audiences realized you could do it.
So we have an audience question from James. He asks, you compared some stats with other activations you've done in Roblox. Were there any key learnings that you brought over from those?
This was the first time we had worked with Sawhorse. Again, we'd built a lot of gaming experiences. Warner Brothers was the first studio to partner with Roblox back in 2018 on the first Aquaman movie. And so we've evolved and we're wanting to learn at every instance. In this case, we really focused on time spent and, again, making a game that didn't feel like an advertisement. I also think if you think about the kind of the world I live in, our marketing campaign, those campaigns, these windows are getting smaller and smaller because we all know there's a lot happening in the world and you want to be sure that any marketing message you're working on is breaking through. And so we had a short amount of time to develop, launch, and then, test this game or to see the results from this game and, again, drive people to buy tickets. And so it was about a 3-month window where we, had about a 5-week development time, which I think is pretty unique to Roblox, that you can build a game as immersive of this in that amount of time. If you were to ask me, you would look at this and think, oh, it took them a couple months or close to a year to develop something with all these characters and all these objects. Well, Sawhorse, again, was a great partner in helping us get over the line and build it rather quickly. And then the key metric we were looking at is time spent in games. So up until this point, we had probably seen about half of those 7 minutes that we were really proud of. We had seen about half of that. And I think a lot of that came from building what felt maybe experiences that felt more like advertisements than actual games. And it's crucial to just make it a successful game that, again, audiences want to learn more about or want to lean into and discover items in. And working with Sawhorse was crucial to ensuring that element. And we saw double the gameplay time that we had in the past, which is extremely valuable.
You mentioned using the time spent in the game as a metric for success. Were there any other benchmarks that sort of were of the utmost importance to measuring success in this experience?
Yeah, traffic and overall reach. So, I talked about it a little in the presentation, but for me, UGC and content that we saw generated outside of the game equals heat and equals urgency, and it's money can't buy material. And so what I was really excited about is that we have always seen in partnering with Roblox a lot of UGC that ends up on TikTok and YouTube. We saw almost double the amount that we're used to seeing, almost 90 million impressions and views on that content alone. We saw, more Roblox influencers opting into this than we had in the past. All of it, I think, were metrics that we were closely monitoring. Again, the other thing that we were looking at is we knew we had a challenge as it related to Gen Z audiences who didn't know the character of Beetlejuice, who hadn't seen the first movie when it was initially in theaters. And so in this instance, we had the challenge of let's introduce them to this character in a way that they understand who he is, what he's all about, what this world of the afterlife is. And that was all accomplished in this virtual experience. So we're closely monitoring the amount of traffic that we're able to get through the experience itself. And we saw that was extremely high as well. So all of these metrics from traffic to UGC to time spent, all of these things are things that we were monitoring in the virtual experience. Ticketing was an important element. Again, we were driving folks outside of the platform to buy tickets, and we were monitoring the amount of conversion that was happening there. About, I want to say 1 in 4 users who were at the experience were also being driven to Fandango. And so for me, that's a really awesome metric too, and one that we'll look to challenge ourselves with, on future builds that we do on the platform.
Using a virtual experience, as you've said before, you don't want it to look like an advertisement. And that, I think, dovetails well with another audience question. This is from Rose. The last panel talked about the importance of play to reach today's audiences. How important is gaming to Warner Bros? And I think I just want to add to that, when we think of play, I think a lot of us probably think of outside or really kind of active things. But for a brand, especially in a growing virtual ecosystem, gaming is a really big area of play. And so, to Rose's point, how important is that to Warner Bros. Pictures?
It's critical. Warner Brothers also has an entire gaming division that I sit separate from. And so we certainly understand and, value the importance of play. I think for me as a marketer, to create something that isn't just passive viewing, but that people are exploring these worlds. And I think, as they're used to exploring these virtual worlds, they're then exploring what is the world of your movie. That is invaluable and something that is critical in, again, the metrics that I was touting earlier, but just making sure that audiences are spending time with your brand, getting to know your brand, creating content inclusive of your brand. What a new opportunity for us at Warner Bros. And again, one that we've been honing in on since our first experience with Roblox in 2018, and one that we'll continue to hone in on is how do we immerse audiences in our storytelling and make sure that we're reaching as many folks as possible through the power of play in these virtual environments. I think that there's a real opportunity there, and one that I hope that we continue to leverage, on future titles.
So we got under 2 minutes now, and we've been talking all this time about standing up a successful virtual brand activation. But I want to end the discussion on what these worlds are not good for, and I think this is important because clearly marketers can't do a virtual world for every single marketing move. There's plenty that probably don't apply well. And so what kinds of moments or occasions or promotions do you see as not fitting the mold for a brand to launch a virtual activation?
Yeah, I think, not every story or campaign would benefit from a virtual world. And I think if a brand is trying to communicate something that's very grounded in reality, like a drama, or, specifically Warner Brothers, if we were trying to present something that's grounded in reality, like a drama, or, something that's emotionally intimate that doesn't lend itself to gamification, I think those are probably some of the things that a virtual space might not be the best fit for. I also think if the audience you're trying to reach isn't accustomed to immersive environments, or if the campaign needs to reach, a broader, older demographic, then maybe traditional channels are the way to go in those instances. But in this case, when it came to reaching Gen Z, when it came to introducing the world of Beetlejuice, introducing the world of the afterlife to an entire new audience, there was no better place to be than on Roblox and then on TikTok. And we saw a lot of success there, and one that was specific to the audience that we were trying to reach and the audience that we were trying to get out to the movie theater.
Nice. Well, Cameron, I think that's our time. Really appreciate you going through all these slides and showing us the trailer and bringing, the two guys behind you. Is a pleasure chatting about this.
Thanks for having me. I'm going to do a shameless plug that we have some big movies coming up next year, from Minecraft to F1 to Ryan Coogler's Sinners to James Gunn's Superman. We have big movies in theaters near you in 2025, and I hope everyone gets out and buys a ticket to see them.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm going to hand it over to Garrett Sloan, Chief Technology Reporter. And there he is. Garrett, take it away.
Thank you, Asa. I will. And thanks everyone who's stuck around for the inaugural Ad Age Emerging Tech Summit. Appreciate everyone just tuning in and enjoying all the content, I hope. And now finishing things off, we're going to explore just a few topics. Some we have touched on throughout the day, and others are sort of new, and we want to still explore some tech subjects, your biggest tech questions answered, basically. And for that, we do have Cecilia Dones, principal and founder of consulting firm Standard Deviations. I want to welcome her to the screen and say hi, Cecilia.
Hello. Welcome. Thank you for showing everyone.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining us. This is great. And before we get started, I'm going to let everyone know that we're a participation culture here, and they can submit questions that we'll hopefully get to at the end if they have any that pop up during our talk, which we're going to get into a few subjects that I think we're both interested in. I know you are. So again, thank you for doing this. To just sort of sum up for us, where we've seen a lot of things today, and I wanted to cover some of those subjects with you, our expert. So thank you again.
Yes, of course. And I'm very curious what everyone has for questions.
Well, yeah, as you know, we did put out a little bit of a survey ahead of time, and throughout the day, some more responses were coming in. We were asking people what would they like us to talk about, and one of the subjects was these were ideas you and I and everyone fielded and thought maybe these could be subjects that are interesting, and synthetic data came up as a hot topic people wanted to understand. And then throughout the day, some of our guests also spoke to synthetic data. So I think that's a good place to start, because there was a lot of interest in that subject. And I was trying to field out. I'll just throw it to you. What is synthetic data, and why is it coming up today in our emerging tech talk?
So very, very good question. I love the intuition. And just to give a little bit of background, I've spoken about this topic in technical forums, other marketing forums, research forums. This is not limited to just marketing. And so this idea of, can we utilize big data to create even bigger data so that way we can feed these hungry algorithms, is something that's touching all sectors, all functions, anyone that's using AI or analytics inside of their organization. So I do have a few slides just to give us a little bit of a primer. Full transparency, I have done these slides before in other forums, but we'll see how it goes for this one. So who am I? As mentioned, I'm Cecilia Dones. I am the founder of Standard Deviations. I am a chimera. What do I mean by that? I am a practitioner as well as an academic. And so what that means is I've done a whole bunch of time at the brand. So at L'Oreal or organizations like LVMH. I've also done time in school. So I have taught and lectured at MIT, at Columbia. I've done my time in agency. So I did time at WPP and Publicis as well to understand other clients. And then also now I have also other clients in other verticals as well. So I do have other vertical experience. And so things that I really am obsessed about better understanding is that from an academic perspective, I'm really obsessed with understanding authenticity and trust in virtual spaces. And the last speaker was talking about virtual environments, so that was very exciting for me. That is a very fancy way, very long and convoluted academic fancy way of saying, I don't really know what's real online, and I have trust issues with the internet. And so that's what I study academically. And if we go on to the next slide, we'll start talking about synthetic data. So I cannot see everyone, but I have been told there's a lot of you out there. So I'm going to hope this resonates. How many of us are familiar with Coke? I'm watching your virtual hands, or I can feel the vibes through the screen. How many of us are familiar with Coke Zero, the sugar-free version? So this is the analogy I use when defining synthetic data. So synthetic data is data that is generated that is meant to imitate the properties of real data. So in this case, Coca-Cola is the real soda, whereas Coke Zero is specifically formulated to be sugar-free, but also taste like real Coke. And so when we think about synthetic data, oh, what is that? How do we generate it? All of those technical kinds of things. I want you to put this into your mind. Coke versus Coke Zero. So real Coke versus a type of Coke that's meant to taste like the real thing, but with zero sugar. So why do we care about this? So I alluded to it earlier. We have hungry algorithms out there that are always looking for more data to be able to work. If we go to the next slide, from a data perspective, data is complex. It's consequential. And oh goodness, it's full of challenges. And so what you see on the left-hand side is a typical one of those charts, and all the sourcing's at the bottom. So feel free to double check me or look up the latest stats. So the estimated impact of data is going to be roughly 181 zettabytes, I believe, by 2025. Fun fact about people is we have a hard time understanding really big numbers. So what do we mean by 181 zettabytes? So if you were to count all of the grains of sand in the world, not even close. So about 24 times, 25 times the amount of sand on Earth is about the amount of data we'll have in about a year. And so from that perspective, there's so much data. Most of it is not mine. Most of it still needs to be curated. Most of it still needs to be cleaned. But when there are mistakes with the data, oh gosh, it costs businesses all sorts of revenue implications. So in this case, this fun stat here is 4.88 million. And so not only is it complex, there's a lot of it, it's consequential, it costs businesses money when we get it wrong. It's challenging in the sense that we need more insights. We need to better understand our consumer. There's all sorts of regulation that's coming up. So those of us who may be familiar with GDPR, CCPA, CPRA, the regulation coming out of Colorado, Virginia, the EU AI Act. These are all types of regulations that are attempting to help us curate or put governance around our data and our AI. So that makes it even more complicated. And then from a privacy standpoint, where we're very much concerned about making sure we keep consumers' data safe and private, there's always going to be a cat and mouse game around anonymizing data, meaning traditional techniques, as the technology continues to evolve, will fall out of favor, will not be as effective as before. And so we're constantly having to figure out new ways to make sure that we're keeping the promise around making sure consumers' data is safe. And so if we go into the next slide, this is a fun one just because, and the build on that is that I was looking for Coke Zero, and then I learned so much more as I was frantically looking for pictures. There are variants of Coke Zero. So here are all the flavors that I was able to find. Similar, the analogy still works when it comes to synthetic data. So what that means is that there are differing ways, technical techniques. I'm not going to mention the statistical and AI techniques now, but your data counterparts you can definitely have a conversation with them. There are different ways to generate synthetic data. So those different ways are like different flavors of Coke Zero, and it matters because the different ways you generate synthetic data could have implications on how you interpret this data and what it really means. So to summarize the definition, if we go to the next slide. So the trade-offs between real and synthetic data. So we start again with the data type. So observed data or real data is Coca-Cola. So it helps us to understand what's really happening. And so the trade-off is that it can be kind of expensive, sometimes time-consuming to collect, and it doesn't necessarily cover all possibilities, meaning you don't get all of your consumers. Of course, you're always taking a sample, and it can be kind of resource-intensive and time-intensive to obtain. Synthetic data, which again is meant to taste like the real Coke, but sugar-free, it's really good for exploring new ideas quickly and cheaply in a privacy safe way. And so that gets very exciting when you're thinking about, well, gosh, I want to try something new. I know I need to have speed to market. How can I do that? Knowing, utilizing the data I have, but also recognizing I don't have a lot of time. So this is where synthetic data, and we'll talk about more applications, could be very helpful. The trade-off is that since it is not real data, since it is not the real Coke, it may not always be as accurate regarding representing real world. And it has to always be validated. So this is where marketing and data has a strong partnership to do validation. I also teach AI ethics. And so this is an area that is particularly of interest to me in the sense that if you represent intersectionality, if you have any marginalized communities that are part of, or minority communities that are part of your consumer base, part of your customer base, synthetic data may not be as accurate as you want it to be. And so making sure that you're working with your data counterparts to do validation checks to make sure the data is representing what you need it to represent is so critical. But it can, again, privacy safe, and it also can speed up the development process. The last data type that I'll mention is simulated data. So sometimes this gets confused, especially when we have all sorts of conversations around new suppliers, new vendors that can bring new capabilities. Synthetic data is really good for iterating new ideas quickly and cheaply. Simulated data is about predicting how things will work. And we see this applied very often with processes we understand very, very well. So I see this a lot in manufacturing, in robotics. Some of the technologies we use for self-driving cars, that's all simulated data. It's simulating streets to teach the AI. So it relies on real world assumptions about processes, and it can be very complex to model. And so if your organization doesn't have the necessary resources to dive really deep to build those kinds of capabilities, simulated data may not be necessarily appropriate fit for you. But again, it's always a point in time regarding how it is simulating the real world. So as the world changes, that's something you constantly have to think about. Is this simulated data actually going to be helpful or harmful for the use case? And so use cases for marketing. If we go to the next slide. So this is my favorite. On the left-hand side, and please feel free to take a picture because this is an excellent starter for business use cases if you want to utilize synthetic data. So on the left, we have the marketing activity. So These are typical things we do as marketers. We're constantly thinking about new ways to do personalization. We're always trying to better target our advertising to the right consumer, right time, right message. We're always trying to get the most efficiency, most productivity out of our campaigns. We're also always trying to understand the customer journey, understanding that there's many touch points and it's always changing and dynamic. And then we're also trying to always find new opportunities in the marketplace. And so the second column really speaks to, how can it help? How can synthetic data potentially help? And here we see some of the benefits of utilizing synthetic data for those specific use cases. And so it's really, again, about speed, privacy safe, and making sure that you can iterate and test as quickly as possible. However, my favorite column on the right-hand side, you want to think twice. So again, if there is underlying bias inside of your data, if there are potential blind spots inside of your data, these are all things I'm not asking marketers to know offhand, but I am asking all of us in the marketing space as practitioners to partner with our data counterparts, partner with our agencies, partner with our analytics folks to help us understand and think through critically, does this synthetic data really represent what we want in real life? Is it really, is it oversimplifying assumptions we've made about the marketplace that could potentially create bias and unfair treatment of certain populations? Is this really going to help us make decisions? All of those types of critical data quality questions, you want to partner with your data analytics folks, be it internal or external. And so if we go into the last slide, so I'm a proponent of testing into synthetic data. There are obvious use cases that it could really help organizations, again, with caution and in partnership with your data analytics counterparts. And so the real question for all of us marketers in practice is, do we want a can or do we want a fountain? Now, this is a circle of trust. So I'm more than happy to tell everyone that my preference is actually fountain. I know. We can send the angry tweets at me later. All right. And with that, thank you so much. That's the definition of synthetic data. We went through some use cases and some watch outs and why we should care about synthetic data in marketing.
That was excellent. Thank you, Cece. And I don't think you're alone. Fountain soda is preferable for lots and probably for data. We want a fountain of data over just a candidate, right?
Yes, of course.
Now, the way synthetic data came up during an earlier workshop on AI was we were just talking about how I asked if large language models were running into any sort of wall in terms of their able to achieve advances, because I've read a little bit about that. I wasn't quite sure what that means. If ChatGPT's next version can't be as big a leap as its previous generation, and someone had mentioned how synthetic data can help train models to be even bigger because they're running out of real data. So we're going to train them on synthetic data. So I was thinking, that's sounds interesting, but where do you get synthetic data? I don't even know where does it come from? Fountain?
Fair enough. So what typically happens is you have an underlying real data set, and you do a whole bunch of maths to get some statistical properties. And so I'll just use common statistical properties, oversimplifying the entire process. So those of us with technical backgrounds, you can let me know later how I oversimplified it. So something like mean, median, mode, the distribution, what the data looks like. So those statistics, those descriptive statistics or algorithmic statistics of the underlying data set, we keep only those pieces, put that into a formula, which we call now an algorithm, and then you utilize that formula to generate new data, and that's the synthetic data. So you've already removed the original data. You only looked at the average, you only looked at the mean, you only looked at the distribution and shape, and you're using those statistics to generate new data into a new formula that produces the new data, which is synthetic data. So it's the idea of Coke versus Coke Zero, meaning you have the original flavor of Coke, which they definitely engineered to taste a certain way. And then with Coke Zero, you understand, oh, it's supposed to taste like this. The carbonation is supposed to feel like this. Okay, we got the parameters, and now we just need to solve for how do we not actually have sugar in it. And that's how they've created Coke Zero, with a slightly different formula, but utilizing the same properties of, oh, it should taste like this. The carbonation should be like this. The caffeine should be like that. And so that's another way to utilize the analogy to help explain it. I will say, yes, you can utilize synthetic data to do training. However, my watchouts, when I was mentioning think twice, is that, again, if there is underlying bias inside of the original data set, or maybe there was no bias in the original data set, but you were using it for purpose A, but it's not appropriate for purpose B, training another algorithm utilizing that data could be quite risky. It could produce outcomes. It will produce an outcome, but not an outcome maybe that you're interested in actually utilizing to create a consumer experience. So this is where I would say being very, very clear as marketers, what do you want your consumers to think, do, and feel? So use those words. Let's not use any AI words. Let's not use any data words. But if we can answer those three prompts, think, do, and feel, what do we want our consumers to think, do, and feel? We can work very closely with our data folks and our analytics folks to map what is the appropriate data technique. Maybe it's not maybe it's not synthetic data. Maybe it's simulated data. Maybe it's data augmented from another third-party source. Maybe we do actually have to go obtain the data. That's where the expertise of those professionals can really help to enhance what the marketer is trying to do. And then I would also say, you had made a comment around, oh no, are we hitting the limits on what the LLMs can do? There's always going to be a theoretical there's always going to be a theoretical limit in terms of what any particular technology can do. So it does not go to infinity. Are we starting to see the edges of it? Potentially. And I will offer up, there is a professor out of Wharton. I follow him closely, Professor Malik, Ethan Malik. He also has a recent book, I would say, I think it might have been this year, around, if you want to look it up, it's Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI, I believe is the title. What I love about his work is that it's, one, very accessible for everyone, meaning he purposely is an excellent scientific communicator. So he takes all of the stuff that we do as academics and research and really translates it in a way that's like, oh, okay, so this is what it means for me in real life. Oh, this is what it means for me in terms of my work and the kinds of things that I'm trying to do professionally. He did make comments regarding the limitations around LLMs. It would not be a sky is falling situation. It's more that while the researchers are starting to see the edges of what could potentially be a limitation, for those of us in practice, we're not fully utilizing everything all that AI has to offer yet. And so from that perspective, there's still a significant amount of opportunity for brands to engage in AI technologies, generative AI technologies, as appropriate for the value proposition to the consumer.
Hi, Cecilia.
Hello.
Hey, yeah, sorry, Garrett lost internet and he should be back shortly, but oh, there he is. Okay.
Okay. Ooh, we are solving problems in real time. I love it.
Yeah, I was doing so well, and we were getting so close, so close to being perfect. But here we are on the internet, and there's issues. So, but you, what did I miss, CC? I'm sure I missed one of the best parts.
I offered a book recommendation by Professor Ethan Malik, Co-Intelligence. I believe that's the title, Living and Working with AI. Highly recommend. It's very accessible in terms of a read, and I would follow him as well in terms of He's able to translate academic research into what does this mean for me as a professional? What does this mean for me in marketing? What does this mean for me as a worker who's trying to live and be productive with AI? So I find his work to be quite accessible. And so he also makes comments regarding, okay, while the theory says we're getting close to the edge of hitting maximum, practically speaking, we haven't hit it yet, meaning most organizations still have opportunity to leverage AI in what they're doing. So especially in marketing, we have tons of opportunity still to leverage AI to maximize the productivity of our marketing and advertising efforts.
All right, I'm going to look for that book. And before we do run out of time and internet, if that happens again, it won't. I'm not going to jinx it. We're going to talk about a little bit of the ethics too, because that's something, I mean, you've already touched on it with the importance of making sure your data is accurate and useful, especially when you're talking about marginalized communities. So we talked a little bit about ethics here. And the other thing is the ethics of AI. Just, I think we've talked a lot about AI during this whole presentation and event, but there's ways that you're seeing AI poses dangers, and I think a lot of people do. So I wanted to ask you about that and where we see the most risk with AI.
Okay. And solve the world's problems all at once. Okay. So there is a concept that we use in the AI circles and data circles, and it's been around for a while. It's called human in the loop. And I teach this as well. So when we think about ethics, ethics are the let's follow the rules that are in place so that way we minimize harm and we are working towards some collective positive benefit to society. I would argue a step above that might be personal morals, meaning we have individual responsibilities. Are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the best we can to ensure that we're holding on to our values while we learn to use these technologies? And the reason why I say that is every single one of us who are utilizing AI in our marketing practices, if it's to create content, if it's to create text, if it's to create images, if it's to optimize the process from getting from ad to impression, whatever it is, we have a choice to let the machine take over the wheel or let the AI take over the wheel, or for us as people to practice agency, to make sure that we're still taking action. We are still in control at the end of the day. And because we are still in control at the end of the day, that helps us to minimize the potential harms, not by a malicious means, but by unintended means with biases inside of AI algorithms. So I always recommend human in the loop as a framework and a philosophy for working with AI. So what does that mean? So let's say you're producing an ad and you're like, gosh, the generative AI is producing images and they kind of all look similar. But my consumer, I know, is not all the same. They're not all a monolith. Okay, maybe I need to find someone on my team that can help kind of bring additional insight into, wait, let me double check. Is this potentially creating an unintended bias against certain parts of our consumer base that we didn't intend? And it's making sure that we're always including people as part of that process instead of fully automating it away. So human in the loop is a very good and standard, and you can say it across different functions and different expertise, and they'll understand, way of making sure that we try to learn how to utilize AI in the most ethical way possible while still delivering value to our consumer and our organizations.
Those are all excellent points. I think just to raise one of the examples was character.ai recently. I don't know if we wanted to dive into that a little bit, but it was an example of a product with AI that consumer could interact with, and young children were using it, and it wasn't, it harmed, I forget the age of the user, but they were taken in by AI. And it led to bad consequences. I think the person died, in fact, even. So you know this instance. That's a is there no human in the loop on the other end of these products that's
Mhm.
making sure they're communicating to consumers in a way that's not dangerous?
Mm-hmm. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky, right? We can do age gating. We're very familiar with that in advertising land, but it's a little bit more complicated in the sense that, especially with generative AI, so chatbots and the like, the input that the user can put in can be anything, literally anything. So you could be talking to, I'm making it up, I don't know why I'm thinking about cereal at the moment, but I am. You could be talking to Tony the Tiger chatbot. And that could be really fun. And the input could be, you could be giving away, I don't know, health information. Ooh, gosh, the company doesn't want to have that. Or you could be talking about a TV show that you were watching. Oh, wait, the company doesn't really want that either. And so, because the inputs can be anything, what we do not have in place yet, and the regulation will take time, and therefore, this is what I mean, the difference between ethics and maybe personal and moral responsibility. We don't have standardized guardrails around inputs that could be potentially self-harming or harming of others. So we learn this sort of in the social media space, meaning obviously if there are threats to certain particularly government individuals, then yes, the government does step in to identify those individuals and et cetera, et cetera. So that there's that monitoring, but for generative AI, we don't have those standards yet. And so in the case where a child or a marginalized individual, or even just anyone inputting into a chatbot, something, an alarming message that could potentially indicate self-harm or harm of others, we don't have protocols yet to say, oh gosh, the machine needs to stop, the machine needs to defer to a human, or the machine needs to address a different protocol to address this cry for help. And so that's where, especially those of us who are building these kinds of user experiences, which is great. It's part of the participatory culture that some of the other presentations we're talking about. Our consumers want to engage. We want them to engage. So it's a good thing. However, we need to make sure that we're thinking through the cases of what if there's this edge case or edge or corner case where you have some message that might be alarming. How do we address this from a protocol? It means there's going to be more collaboration required with our whoever's in charge of ethics. Potentially legal might be more involved. Additional security, cybersecurity might be more involved. It means a new ways of working as we try to address, well, there isn't standards today in the software. So how do we build these guardrails so that not only are we keeping our organizations safe from information we don't want to own or don't want to have in our servers, but also giving the opportunity for our consumers who are reaching out, if they need help, can we be that facilitator for help? And then it's up to the individual organization to decide, do they want to be that facilitator for help? And so those are decisions to be made.
And that was a nice segue, and this can be our last subject to dive into briefly, is the participatory culture, because it ties into, like you had just mentioned, brands handing over some control to the consumer to do something with, and it's helpful. And Roblox Warner Bros. Talked about it with Beetlejuice, how they give the brand over to the consumer in Roblox or any other worlds, and so this participatory culture is an important part of what brands are doing, and you've certainly seen this. So how do you think of that?
Yeah. So there's another professor, I believe he's out of USC I think he's out of USC now, Henry Jenkins. So he was really a media scholar, very interested in fandoms. So fan fiction, how many of us remember Twilight? Okay, maybe not. Okay, I won't admit that myself. Okay, fair. He was very interested in fandoms, and what he was studying was, why are these people creating, building off of the original content? And so that's where the idea of, instead of a consumer culture where consumers just get fed content, get fed media, get fed advertising, they actually want to engage. So instead of a one-way direction in terms of communication and engagement, It's two ways. And so we've moved from a consumption culture to a participatory culture. So brands need to consider, how do you enable that kind of participation in a way that, again, we want to make sure things are safe for everyone involved, but also in a way that allows the consumer to express themselves authentically. And so the challenge there is too much structure. Then the consumer will engage, of course, but they will not have the same level of endowment of ownership over that engagement, as opposed to, we just mentioned it, a Roblox situation where you can create whatever you want. It's open world. Minecraft situation where you can create whatever you want. It's open world. And so brands need to figure out, how comfortable are they with making sure that they enable these capabilities, and also making sure that while they enable these capabilities, they do it in an ethical and conscientious way.
Well, and on that note, this was so helpful, and I'm glad we were able to touch on all these subjects, because they touch on everything we've talked about throughout the day, and you were just fantastic wrapping it up for us and explaining all this. So thank you for doing it, Cece.
Thank you. It was really fun, and I hope everyone is able to take a little bit, maybe a book reading for the holidays, I don't know, from the discussion today and the whole entire day as well.
I think they will. So thank you again. And I'm going to wrap up here and just say thanks again to our co-presenting sponsor, Kantar. And for everyone else, have a great rest of the afternoon. We hope to see everyone at the next Tech Summit. And follow the Emerging Tech newsletter and technology coverage at adage.com. See you there.